The human experience is complex, but simply put, it refers to the realities of human existence, including the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical characteristics of human life. Charles Lamb's poem Conquest of Prejudice tells of a story between an African boy, Juba, and Henry Ohm, an Englishman, and their initial prejudice against each other, and them eventually overcoming it through conversation and sharing individual experiences. The human experience of prejudice and discrimination is expressed in Lamb's Conquest of Prejudice. Discrimination and racial prejudice in the form of racism is a collective human experience, experienced by a great number of people, and Lamb expresses this racism through his poetry. In his poem, through the quote, "It does appear to me to be a great disgrace and shame a black should be admitted here." Lamb characterizes Henry Ohm as racist, typical to the conventions of the society in the time of the text's production. Within the context of the poem, majority of society's reaction to this is similar, and soon a hatred of racial outsiders become prominent. And every boy now looks offended. The late 1770s in a predominantly white England presented a heavy unacceptance towards racial outsiders, and so demonstrated a social hierarchy, where these racial outsiders were at the bottom and thus discriminated against. And so these racist attributes of Henry Ohm and the boys within the school is reflective of the lives and cultures of the time during which the text was produced, which is a key aspect of the common module syllabus. Lamb's poem Conquest of Prejudice is related to Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice in both of their expression of discrimination and prejudice. While in Lamb's poem racial prejudice is expressed, Shakespeare's drama expresses religious prejudice. In the drama, Shylock is the embodiment of a religious outsider, being Jewish in a predominantly Christian Venetian society, thus being the subject of discrimination, and so he expresses this mistreatment. In You call me disbeliever, cutthroat dog, and spit upon my Jewish gabardine, and all for use of that which is mine own. Comfort in mutual converse found signifies the beginning of a friendship through conversation. The human experience of friendship is symbolic of the possibility of change occurring, change in the sense of disregarding societal prejudice such as racism. Juba and Henry Ohm, despite their very contrasting individual experiences, can come together and bond over if given the chance to. Juba can speak, for he has been a voyager, and Ohm can boast he London's famous town has seen. In essence of Lamb's Conquest of Prejudice, the poem suggests that in order for change to occur and for friendship to become significant, the willingness to initiate the change must be there, and through understanding of each other, prejudice is possible to eradicate. In the time of the text production, which is around 1770s in England, where prejudice and discrimination against racial and religious outsiders was a normality, the friendship formed between Juba and Henry Ohm is peculiar to the society, thus is an anomaly. The poem is encouraging of change to occur and for readers to see the world differently, and claiming this change can take place very easily, simply through conversation and understanding. Friendship, as suggested by the poem, is simply a tool in amending prejudice against individuals. Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice is also very expressive of the human experience of friendship. The many different friendships within Shakespeare's drama can be contrasted to provide representations of society's prejudice against certain minorities. Antonio and Bassanio, two Venetian cushions, have a very strong friendship, where extremist means lie all unlocked to occasions, which is starkly contrasted to the lack of and unwillingness of Antonio to form a friendship with the Jewish Shylock. "I am as like to call thee so again. If thou wilt lend me money, lend it not as to thy friends." This stark contrast in the relationship between Antonio and Bassanio, a Christian, and Antonio and Shylock, a religious outsider, is a strong representation of prejudice. Lamb's Conquest of Prejudice is very relevant to the contemporary society of the 21st century, in which prejudice and discrimination against racial outsiders is prevalent, and where friendship is a necessity to overcome such issues. With the death of African Americans by majorly white police simply due to their race, and the Stolen Generation and White Australian policy and its continuing effects, racial prejudice is part of societies around the world, thus making Lamb's Conquest of Prejudice all the more relevant. Rather than friendship occurring in its literal sense, the poem uses friendship as a symbol of change and encourages open-mindedness and opportunity for people to get to know each other and realize that everyone is human after all. Through this, the poem maintains its relevance to the wider world, which is an essential aspect of the common module syllabus. Lamb's Conquest of Prejudice must be selected as a text to be studied because it discusses two essential collective human experiences. The poem expresses these human experiences eloquently and through context, purpose, structure, stylistic and grammatical features to form, shape, meaning. The poem gives insight into anomalies and thus inconsistencies in human behavior, and the role of storytelling to reflect the society of that time is explicitly discussed, and the poem can be related to personal experiences and the wider world.